He's being called the most dangerous cartel leader in the world. And for the second time, he just staged a spectacular escape from prison.
Esto representa sin duda una afrenta para el Estado mexicano.
There was a lot of pressure on the Peña Nieto government. They looked ridiculous. They looked complicit. At a minimum, they looked inept.
Authorities are now on a manhunt throughout the country and have also issued an international warrant.
After his second prison escape, he was like boosted into orbit in terms of his infamy. Whoever he really is as a person, he's become this larger-than-life villain.
His lawyers started seeking Kate del Castillo, a Mexican soap opera actress, to do a movie about El Chapo.
Yo lo que estoy interesada es sentarme a escuchar por primera vez de viva voz de un narcotraficante de esa estatura y que me cuente su historia de vida.
They stayed in touch via BlackBerry messages and letters. And it was that relationship between Del Castillo and El Chapo that eventually led to the meeting between Sean Penn and the notorious drug lord.
They all had their own interests in mind. Sean Penn wanted to write an article. Kate del Castillo wanted to make a movie. And for Chapo Guzman, I think that it was just his desire to have a relationship with Kate del Castillo.
If he had laid low, he might still be free.
I've worked on a lot of big stories and wild stories and strange stories, but this is the biggest and wildest. This was happening in early October 2015. Jan Wenner, Rolling Stone's founder, called me and he said, hey, we're gonna go for lunch at my house and meet Sean. Sean Penn had a history with Rolling Stone. He wrote a piece after Hurricane Katrina. By this point, Sean had gone down to Mexico on a private plane, had been picked up by the Sinaloa cartel, had traveled to the mountains somewhere, didn't know where, and had sat down and drank tequila and ate tacos with El Chapo. Aside from just our jaws dropping and not eating any of our food at lunch, the biggest sort of question we had is, are you sure it was El Chapo? And Sean said, well, we took some pictures.
When I understood from colleagues of mine that there was a potential for contact with him, it just struck me. This is somebody upon whose interview could I begin a conversation about the policy of the war on drugs. That was my simple idea.
Sean Penn, sé que había hecho muchas cosas buenas por Haití, le interesa el bienestar del mundo, me parece muy bien, dije, pues órale, nos lo llevamos.
When Penn and Kate showed up on the set, it shocked the hell out of me. The Mexican Marines and our guys had been planning to make a raid on a compound, which was in a very, very remote area, Sinaloa, because we believed he was there, or at that point, key surrogates of him were there.
After his escape, we started monitoring the cell phones and hard lines belonging to friends, associates of Chapo Guzman using directional finding equipment. Chapo Guzman had sent Kate del Castillo a BlackBerry telephone. Well, guess what happened there? That phone was being intercepted.
The Marines were in a position to scale this ravine, and then the Mexican government told them to stand down because there were 2 U.S. citizens up there. My thought at the time was, I don't give a who they are. If they get caught in crossfire, that's it.
Nosotros recibimos el tip que se habían reunido en una reserva ecológica propiedad de la Universidad Autónoma de Sinaloa. Yo estuve por ahí tomando fotografías y tomando notas. ¿Qué sabíamos? Bueno, que se habían reunido, que les habían puesto la mesa, que habían llevado 2 cocineros, creo que de Culiacán, para que les prepararan las comidas. Pero lo que periodísticamente para nosotros era importante es que el Chapo Guzmán, el gran capo, se había reunido en el campus de la Universidad Autónoma de Sinaloa. Para nosotros esa era la noticia.
What Sean had gotten on this first trip was a crazy night, a wild tale, and some insights into El Chapo. But what he hadn't gotten was a formal interview. Chapo wasn't ready to do the sit-down interview, but agreed to do it in a week. He said, if you come back in 8 days, we will do the interview.
Almost a day and a half later, the decision is made by the Marines to go in by helo, and we ended up arresting his cook. He got away.
A partir de que él se despega de ahí, la Marina lo empieza a perseguir, lo tenía ubicado. Hay un enfrentamiento por allá en la montaña donde el Chapo creo que rueda por ahí en un barranquillo, se lastima una pierna, luego se esconde, le pierden la pista.
But eventually, Chapo was in touch with Kate. And it was sort of clear that it was going to be really difficult to get Sean back together with El Chapo because there was too much heat on El Chapo. It was too dangerous. It was too risky. So at that point, we developed a set of questions that were pretty far-ranging about how he rose to dominate the drug trade in Mexico. We translated them and sent them to him. He answered some of those questions on video, and they sent it to Kate.
I think at that point, we all decided that we got to even step it up another notch. We were using pattern of life things to try to find who was around him. But now the Marines were engaged in surveillance, physical surveillance, watching places. You know, the old-time gumshoe stuff you have to do to put intelligence together.
Mi equipo nosotros fuimos los que pusimos como punto probable que era la ciudad de Los Mochis. Fue fundada por americanos, son calles rectas, tienes calles muy amplias, un drenaje más grande, más resistente. Lo que se pensó es que iba a buscar una ciudad con acceso rápido para salirse.
There was a cluster of condos, if you will, best way to describe them, that all had connections to a sewer system. So they and us decided, okay, this is what we're going to concentrate on watching these.
We really essentially set out to develop the piece for Sean late October, November. We knew the interview wasn't going to be everything that we hoped it would be, so the piece needed to carry more weight. Certainly the issues of the politics of the drug war were important to Sean and fit in well with the values of the magazine. So there was a lot to discuss. We were planning to finish the story on a Friday night, January 8th, and then be on stands the following week.
Late at night, I was contacted by our chief of operations who said, Jack, they've seen him. They got him at a location. I'll never forget when it happened, and it was like a movie.
There's coordination between DEA and the Mexican Marines. They decide that they're going to hit this house.
No sabía cuánta fuerza de reacción tenía, de tanta fuerza de fuego había en esa casa, y teníamos tensión, un poco de miedo a lo mejor, y lo que sí pensamos, pues se va a poner bueno.
¡Vamos entrando acá!
Normalmente un grupo de intervención es de 7 personas.
¡Intervención! ¡Ey! ¡Sobre esa puerta!
Nosotros éramos 14 por la magnitud operativo. Por el tipo de personaje que era, sabíamos que todo el apoyo que pudiéramos llevar era necesario.
Tenemos una herida. ¡Sale!
The Mexican Marines killed 5 of Chapo Guzman's sicarios. As they go up the second floor, and they start to search the entire house, they find behind a glass mirror a tunnel leading into the sewage system.
He was with his chief security, El Cholo Ivan. They escaped through the tunnel. Unfortunately for them, it started raining, and the water level and the sewers started going up. They had to go to the surface. De pronto escuchamos que reportan el robo de un vehículo con violencia un poco retirado de la casa donde fue el asunto. Y nosotros obviamente dijimos, son ellos.
A couple of federal police agents stopped this car because it had a stolen car report, not because they were looking for El Chapo. And they took El Chapo and El Cholo lo iban to a motel that was nearby.
The federal police are afraid that the Sinaloa cartel is going to launch an offensive, so they go and hide at this hotel thinking that they're going to be safe there.
El Chapo told them that los muchachos ya vienen en camino. The boys are coming to look for us.
And then Chapo's man did attempt to bribe the federal police.
En las horas posteriores, que siempre queda la tensión de estar esperando una posible respuesta. Sí había mucho movimiento de personas, pero en ningún momento yo no escuché que ningún policía o marino mencionara que le había ofrecido algo, ni que los hubiera amenazado. Ahí no se escuchó que hayan platicado nada de eso, realmente no pasó nada.
Next morning, I'm attending an event at Quantico with the administrator helping hand out new badges to agents. It was something I couldn't get out of. But I'm on the stage, my phone is blowing up, and I think, oh, God, here we are. I remember I was completely soaked. I was so anxious. And finally, one of my assistants comes and pulls me off the stage. So I get off the stage, I go, I look at the phone, they got him. Now, before I was going to tell my boss, who was going to tell the Attorney General, I wanted to see a picture of him. And within a couple of minutes, they had sent the photo, and there he was in the wife-beater T-shirt that he was doing a backstroke through the sewer in, and it was over. And it was unbelievable.
Esta mañana, en el municipio de Los Mochis, Sinaloa, integrantes de las instituciones de seguridad del Gobierno de la República lograron detener a Joaquín Guzmán Loera. Esta detención, como lo comprometí, habría de suceder.
This caps off an embarrassing few months for the Mexican authorities right after El Chapo's escape straight out of a Hollywood movie. Now it turns out that a different kind of movie may have been instrumental in the Kingpin's capture.
Otro aspecto importante que permitió precisar su ubicación fue el haber descubierto la intención de Guzmán Loera de filmar una película biográfica.
Se vuelve un espectáculo la captura de Joaquín Guzmán por las propias ansias del personaje protagonista de mantener una notoriedad.
En un momento más, los detenidos serán trasladados a los helicópteros.
El Chapo loved to see his cultural significance. He really wanted to see a movie about himself. He thought his life story was worthy of Hollywood. And Hollywood probably would say yes.
Me parece que el Chapo Guzmán se creyó su propia leyenda, se creyó intocable. Y tal vez por un instante realmente pensó que él era la mente genial que había construido todo este imperio de la droga y no era solo un esbirro, una pieza en todo este engranaje criminal donde el gobierno y los consumidores son los engranajes más importantes.
Así quedó el interior de la última guarida de Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán antes de su recaptura. En las inspecciones de la vivienda hallaron DVDs de la producción televisiva La Reina del Sur, en la que una narcotraficante es interpretada por Kate del Castillo, la actriz que gestionó la entrevista entre el capo y el actor estadounidense Sean Penn.
Friday, as we were preparing to close the story, El Chapo got caught. So we set the wheels in motion and we posted the story on Saturday night and watched it completely consume Rolling Stone and the internet.
Quiero dejar en claro el contenido de esta entrevista
es exclusivo para la señorita Kay del Castillo y el señor Sean Penn.
The timing of the final detention of El Chapo brought a lot of doubts and questions. Perhaps the article was going to bring new shame for the Mexican presidency. How is it that these two actors were able to not only locate El Chapo, but meet with him as if they were meeting him in a coffee shop in Brooklyn? I think perhaps they decided to go ahead and detain him because the article was coming to light.
Se vio en todo ese contexto, ¿no? De rebajar la Procuración de Justicia a las notas de espectáculos.
It becomes a very surreal moment, something very different and far away from the reality that I'm seeing as a reporter.
What Sean Penn did probably is not new for Mexican journalists, but he obviously faced none of the risks that they face every day. News organizations, individual journalists have had to flee for their lives. Others have been kidnapped and killed in Mexico for covering organized crime and official corruption, which often intersects. So this is really a very troubling thing. It treated as kind of an entertainment-style news story when we have people dying, journalists in Mexico risking their lives to bring their readers and viewers the truth.
Would it have been different had we sent a journalist with a lot of experience to do that story? Of course, but that wasn't the opportunity. What we had was a really wild, very personal story by Sean Penn. Would we have ever not run that? I think anyone would have run that.
La actividad que usted desarrolla, ¿cómo cree que impacta sobre México? ¿Cree que es un fuerte impacto? Para nada. Para nada. ¿Por qué? Porque, pues, no, el narcotráfico no depende de una persona, sino que depende de muchísimas personas.
He didn't really answer the questions that we really wanted to ask him. But whether or not it's a deep interview, it's an incredible artifact. The myth around El Chapo falls apart in that moment you see him on video speaking.
So he goes right back to the same prison he escaped from. The extradition process, which had already been started when he was there the first time, got jacked up again. I'm terrified the longer he stays down there, he's going to get out.
When Chapo Guzman was recaptured, it raised the stakes for a possible extradition. Extradition was seen as a way of taking him out of the game entirely and make sure that he would actually have to face justice.
La exigencia desde la sociedad era pues una extradición. ¿En qué prisión lo vas a mantener si ya la prisión, que era el ejemplo de una fortaleza contra los criminales, ya estaba vulnerada?
Imagínese una tercera, no creo, pero en este mundo todo es posible, ¿verdad? O sea, por la corrupción que hay, todo eso. Entonces, yo sí pensaría que mejor se lo llevaron para allá.
I thought it was about a 50-50 chance if he would be extradited. There are people saying, well, what does he know? If he's been involved in drug trafficking for 4 decades, he can know many things about many corrupt politicians, and he could talk about those, do they want to let him go?
Cuando ahora que lo recapturan, las condiciones fueron desastrosas. Soy testigo de que fue torturado psicológicamente. Que lo tenían incomunicado, con la luz prendida las 24 horas del día, vigilado las 24 horas del día, pasándole lista cada 3 horas. No lo dejaban dormir. Había guardias que tal vez tenían frustraciones que de alguna forma...